Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Hi, guys. Hi. Okay. Congratulations to Dag for getting first and Mistress for getting second. Yippee, yippee. Hi, everybody. We today are continuing Cradle. And, oh, let me, do a little bit of this. Hi. But yeah, so how's everyone doing? Do, do, do. I don't think I have any technical difficulties that'll stop me from getting into reading today, and I want to get through chapters 5 through 17 because if I do that, then next Thursday I can read the rest of the book, and then the week after I can start Soulsmith. Or maybe we can put a little break in between them, who knows. We'll see. But yeah. So I think oh, yeah. I will say that what's it called? I am fully caught up on VODs, moved over to the VOD channel, luckily. And so hopefully hopefully any here on out VODs will be moving over there. So I think we're good. Um, I am going. Oh, I guess I do have one technical thing I can finish real fast. Uh, all right, give me one moment. Sorry, I have the sniffles, and I'm feeling a bit better than this morning, but it still hasn't been the greatest. But yeah, so I have a little something something that a good friend of mine, Android, has finished. They're not complete yet because I need to get one last thing from Android, but I do have sub badges now. I have sub badges in tiers of 1 to 6. Welcome in, Jade. Welcome in. Um Hi. Welcome in. So there's the 6-month badge. I'm all right. I could be better. Tier 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep. Okay, let's grab these ones. I'm I'm feeling better than this morning, but I still have sniffles and my head hurts a little bit and other things. So I'm hoping I can get through this stream without wanting to cry, and then I have D&D after. But I have to run to the store first. Well, I have to run to the bookstore to get the next Cradle book that came in recently. Oh, I didn't press save on the 9-month. But yeah, if you reload Twitch, you should be able to see all of the sub badges. Or well, the sub badge next to your name. If you are subbed, obviously. My data doesn't like stream right now, sadly, so I'm lagging. Oh no. I'm sorry, Jade. That's not good. Let me reload my Twitch real fast. Refresh. So you're supposed to have a sub badge. Um, yeah, you're supposed to have one. Oh, maybe you have to add it. Thank you for the hydrate, Rain. Welcome in, welcome in. Also, I didn't say this. Congratulations on third, Jade. I'm catching every 10 words. Oh no, oh no. Oh, well, I hope it fixes soon. If it does, let me know and I can um say what I was saying again. Of course, of course. How are you doing, Rain? I hope you're good. Um, might take Twitch just a little bit to finish. Uh, to finish uploading the sub badges. But I do have sub badges now. I'm actually going to show them off because I want everyone to see the intense effort that went into it. So, how do I do this? Oh, I know how to do this. Okay, okay, okay. It was kind of sad that what happened, but when Android made them, um, I didn't know that with the flare for tier 2 and 3, you're supposed to just have the flare and not like the badge itself with flare. Um, and I thought each individual tier of badge had their own flare. So Android made each badge tier with flare, but luckily it was super easy to do the flare, so it didn't take very long. And that's the final thing that I need from Android is the flare by itself, so I can upload that and make sure it goes onto the tier 2 and 3 badges. But I will really quick add a uh what would it be? It'd be a window capture maybe? Window capture badge. Okay. Select a window. File Explorer. Surely this will be fine. Surely, surely. Oh, wonderful. Oh, wait, no, it is in front of my face. That is not wonderful. No, it is under my overlay. There we go. Okay, I will move myself over real quick, just for a sec. And then each of these are the sub badges. I'm going in tiers 1 to 6. Yeah. Can I like open them up? Oh, no. I don't know if you can see that. You can't see that. That's unfortunate. But yeah, these are the sub badges. Um, with the flare. So each of them will have these flares on them, depending on if you're tier 1, 2, or 3. And I think Andrew did a really amazing job. I'm very happy with them. Um, Yeah. So, I lost my train of thought. But yeah, uh, those are the new sub badges. Um, ooh, that's better. Okay. I'm going to actually get rid of that now. No, I'll keep it for now because I don't know if people want to see it later. But anyways, yeah, so those are the badges. They're pretty cool, pretty cool. I'm pretty excited about them. Um, ugh, okay. All right. Well, I think it's time to get into reading. I hope it goes well today with my voice, with being congested and such. But yeah, it should be fun. We are starting with chapter 15, and we will be reading through chapter 17. And then next week we will start with chapter 18 and read through the rest of the book. That is my plan, at least. Chapter 15. Sorry, pardon. Let me try that again. Chapter 15. Night had fallen while Lyndon browsed the lesser treasure hall. He could tell why the Kazan disciple was furious. Obviously, he hadn't made it up to the top. Let's try that one more time. He could tell why the Kazan disciple was furious. Obviously, he hadn't made it to the top in time. He couldn't swallow the idea that an unsouled could succeed somewhere he'd failed. "You're making a ruckus in my hall," Elder Rom said, and the cold in his voice made even Lyndon shiver. The Kazan curbed his anger, bowing. "Apologies, Elder. I forgot myself. I am Kazan Ma Deret, and I have had my honor trampled by the trash behind you." Deret glared at Lyndon, but Lyndon was already sliding away down the other side of the porch, clutching his bundle of 7 white banners. The Kazan disciple turned as though to stop him, but Rom placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "By ignoring me in favor of your rage, you have dishonored me," Elder Rom said. "Explain. How is an unsouled insulted in iron?" Durrett looked briefly surprised, as well he might. Even in the Wei clan, anyone with an iron badge would have been able to dispose of Lyndon as they pleased without question. Lyndon's own grandfather wouldn't have stood up for him as Elder Rom had just done. But he couldn't rely on others to defend him, especially not from the Heaven's Glory School. However Rom felt, the other elders certainly wouldn't be excited about an unsouled joining their ranks. That suited him. Once he found the Sword Sage's disciple, he was gone. Until then, he needed to defend himself. Lyndon slipped between the Lesser Treasure Hall and another building, its stone walls slick with the appearance of rainwater. He stood over a flower bush, in the center of one of those densely packed gardens he'd noticed before. As soon as he was out of sight from the street, he scrambled to untie his bundle. 7 3-foot poles attached to purple banners spilled over the grass. But they weren't the only contents of the treasure he'd taken from the hall. A pair of polished wooden placards followed the banners, each the size of Lyndon's hand and banded with script circles that wrapped around each edge. Ward keys. He slipped both into the sash at his waist and scurried around the edges of the garden, stabbing poles into soft earth. Boundary formations worked on the same principle as smaller script circles. If they were evenly placed in a ring, they would activate the vital aura in the area to fuel some result. If their placement was too sloppy, the boundary wouldn't trigger at all. And if it would only work at peak efficiency, if the banners were precisely equal distance apart. Lyndon didn't need peak efficiency. He needed whatever he could get. When the seventh banner was placed, Lyndon initiated the script on the back. It flared blue-white, and, a second later, the other two banners visible to him through the undergrowth flashed as well. The Madra rushed out of him all at once, almost exhausting his spirit. He stumbled as he walked away, only holding himself upright with a hand on the wall. In his mind's eye, the light traveling through his Madra channels was dangerously dim. Before he'd eaten the Aura Spirit Fruit, he wouldn't have been able to activate this boundary at all. Even now, though a copper could likely use it with ease, he had to be careful. He suppressed the instant longing he felt for all the other treasures inside, the ones that would advance him to copper, or that he could use without feeling like he might lose control of his body at any moment. He had chosen, and now he would prove his choice useful. As he left, he glanced back at the boundary. He didn't feel anything from the boundary as he carried the ward keys with him, but a faint suggestion of white haze had gathered between the boundaries. He even thought he heard a distant eagle's cry. He'd lived among a white fox aura. He'd lived among a white fox aura his entire life, and he could tell when it was gathering. When he rounded the building again, Kazan Majoret was stating the facts of his case. I saw Shet die. He lost himself, crying and moving in circles, until he finally threw himself at the feet of a remnant and begged it to kill him. That is what the trial did to a strong, honorable sacred artist. I ask you now, how could that trash have possibly survived where Shet did not? More than ever, Lyndon was glad he hadn't tried to walk up those steps. They sounded brutal. It seems he has come to answer for himself, Elder Rum said, turning to squint in Lyndon's direction. Lyndon squared his shoulders, drawing himself up to his full height. Durrett was a year or two older than he was, but he looked the Kazan straight in the eyes. Do the irons of the Kazan have nothing better to do than oppress their juniors? Elder Ram turned toward him slowly, like a tree bending in the wind. Kazan Durrett looked like he was about to erupt. Very well, Lyndon said. I'll give you some pointers. Elder Ram, will your humble disciple be punished if I injure a peer in the course of a supervised duel? Durrett's face slowly turned red, and Madra clenched over his shoulders, forming squarish boxes of rippling haze. The hammer on his badge said he was a forger, and the Kazan walked the path of the mountain's heart. He would be able to conjure weapons of crushing force, even half-formed. The constructs floating over his shoulder could smash Lyndon's limbs to pieces. Are you sure about this, boy? Elder Ram said. I can't render any merits to the Heaven's Glory School if I can't even put down a dog from the Kazan clan, Lyndon said, bowing over his fists. Durrett choked out his own agreement to the duel, all but incoherent with rage. For once, Lyndon's appearance worked in his favor. He looked like he was eager to fight, even as his hands shook and cold sweat ran down the back of his neck. Oh, man. I don't know what it is about reading, but it always makes me yawn. He hated provoking people like this, especially people capable of crippling him, but he needed Durrett angry enough to follow, and he was confident in his plan. Well, reasonably confident. His mind spat out a dozen ways this could go wrong, eroding his certainty by the second. But he was committed now. Elder Ram raised one ancient hand in the air, even as Kazan Durrett's forged Madra began to take on shape and definition. They were definitely bricks, appearing line by line as though sketched in midair, and they would gain heft and weight as soon as he finished forging them. For now, they remained floating. To incapacitation or surrender, Elder Ram reminded them. Lyndon leaned onto the balls of his feet, shifting the weight as though he meant to dash with all his speed straight towards Durrett. A blinding golden light flashed from the elder's hand even as he called, "Begin!" Lyndon turned and ran. Most forged Madra did not float. Soulsmiths had to craft their constructs with special techniques in order to get them to levitate. And Mountain's Heart bricks were very dense. The Kazan used their forgers to build walls, constructing intricate scripted arrays to keep the Madra from dissipating. So Durrett couldn't simply will his bricks to blast Lyndon from a distance, which was the only reason why Lyndon had a chance. But he was an iron. He could simply throw them. Without looking behind him, Lyndon ducked to one side as a solid brick smashed into the stones at his feet, blasting into rolling pebbles of Mountain's Heart. He felt the impact through his feet, and it seemed to rattle the air like thunder. Even the stone it landed on showed a faint crack. Lyndon's frantic, heavy breaths had very little to do with the physical exertion. He had started only a few dozen yards away from the edge of the Lesser Treasure Hall, and in the seconds it had taken him to cover the distance, Durrett had almost destroyed his legs. As soon as he crossed the corner, stepping into the dense garden, he snatched the ward key from his belt. Otherwise, he didn't slow down. The iron would be only a breath behind him, and he would have another brick ready to hurl. Lyndon dove into the bushes and waited. Sure enough, Durrett followed a second later, one brick raised in his hand, another forming over his shoulder. He stopped when he saw the garden. Lyndon couldn't allow him to inspect the area for too long, so he rolled away from the bush, intentionally shaking its leaves. A brick blasted the bush to pieces, shredding the branches and tightening the bands of fear around Lyndon's heart. If Durrett didn't approach, if he just stood there at the mouth of the alley and threw bricks... "I knew a white coward wouldn't fight," Durrett called, a freshly formed brick dropping into his hand. "All you have are your tricks. But do you even know any? Did they teach the path of the white fox to an unsouled?" Lyndon trembled as he stared at the spot where he'd hidden the formation banner. Durrett was one step from crossing the boundary, but if Lyndon moved again, he'd need a luck of a gold to avoid getting smashed to pieces by a brick. The leafy branches of the undergrowth had prevented Durrett from finding him so far, along with the barely perceptible distortion the white fox aura left in the air. But if he moved, Durrett would see him for sure. There was one thing he could try. The same old trick every child tried when playing with their friends in the woods. He could throw a rock. Lyndon reached into one of the smaller pockets in his pack, where he usually kept a few half-silver chips. He grabbed something small. Wait, that's not right. Where he usually kept a few half-silver chips, and grabbed something small. He lobbed it out behind his hiding space. Out from behind his hiding space. Jeez, that was a tough one. That was a tough paragraph for me. What the heck? Okay, anyways. It was the glass bead that Suriel had given him. Its blue flame shone like a tiny star. Durrett whipped his arm forward like a striking viper, reacting with a speed that made Lyndon instantly glad he hadn't tried to make a break for it. But he stopped before the brick left his hand. He stared at the rolling marble for a second, as though trying to figure out what it was. He took a single step forward, his foot landing on the grass. When the boundary activated, the white fox aura that had gathered in the atmosphere ignited. Lyndon saw it as though he looked into someone else's dream. The blue flame of the beads split again and again until 7 illusory blue stars spun around Durette's head. He swung the brick at them, staggering away, but his feet actually took him deeper into the boundary. He spun around at the cry of a bird, only to see, instead of an alley wall, an endless forest that stretched out for miles. Lyndon observed all this as though it were painted in front of him. He witnessed it all clearly, even as Durrett launched his brick at the descending talons of a swooping remnant. The forged Madras sailed over the rooftops of the Heaven Glory School, vanishing into the distance. Though Lyndon could see it, it deceived him no more than a painting would have. The ward key shielded him from the effects of the dream aura, protecting him as long as he carried it. So as Kazan Durrett screamed and battled with creatures in a dream, Lyndon slipped away. He had to lean on the rainstone wall to even leave the alley. The last minute had taken more energy from him than the entire trip up the mountain. He slipped around the corner of the Lesser Treasure Hall to avoid any stray bricks, then slumped down against the wall, every muscle in his body trembling out of control. He let his eyes drift shut. The Heaven's Glory School is strict about preventing its disciples from killing one another, Elder Ram said. Lyndon pried his eyes open and tried to stand, to show some modicum of respect. The old man didn't seem to care. Otherwise, we mostly leave our students to their own devices. You should be careful now. There is plenty young Durrett can do to you short of killing you. Too many yous. Too many ooh sounds in that sentence. A tiny, flashing blue rolled out of the garden and along the stones of the road. The elder stared at Suriel's bead even as it came to a stop, its bright blue flame shining steadily. Lyndon leaned over and picked it up. I apologize, Elder. This is merely a toy left to me by my mother. A strange toy, Ram said softly. I would not lower myself to steal from a child, but I would like to examine this bead some day, when you have settled into the school. Lyndon attempted a shaky bow. I owe you at least that much, Elder Ram. Thank you for your advice and for the treasure, which has already saved my life once. The elder chuckled as he walked around the alley. Yours was a very clever choice. He paused before he was out of sight, catching Lyndon's eye. But cleverness is an unstable foundation. Wisdom, loyalty, and strength in the sacred arts. Only these things are firm. Then he ducked into the garden, and a second later the illusory bird calls and shrieks from the white fox boundary faded away. He must have removed one of the banners. Kazan Durrette's labored breathing echoed between the buildings. The victor of your contest is Wei Shi Lyndon, by virtue of incapacitation. As it was a duel for honor, to seek revenge or recompense would shame you greatly. And by extension, my Heaven's Glory School. I will not allow you to bring shame to my school. Do you understand? Elder Ram was speaking clearly for Lyndon's benefit, and he was grateful. With Ram's protection, he might actually last long enough among this school to find the Sword Sage's disciple. He did not fight me honorably, Durrett insisted, his voice filled with anger. Was it honorable for an iron to challenge a boy at the foundation stage? A snap resounded through the alley, and Durrett yelped. This was foolishness, and I want no more of it. Lyndon hid himself inside the Lesser Treasure Hall as Durrett left the alley. If the Kazan knew that Lyndon had overheard that lecture, he would be further shamed, and would have one more reason to pursue his feud. Lyndon wouldn't be able to endure attacks from an iron forever. As Durrett left, the elder managed with a bundle of purple banners in his arms. Take care of these, and don't leave them lying about. I will confiscate them if I feel you have not valued them properly. Hi, Solara. Welcome in, welcome in. How's it going? Hi. Do 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 do. Weird. I decided to save Pokemon Pokopia for Saturday. Gonna be torture. What is Pokemon Pokopia? I've never heard of it. I have no idea what that is. It's a spin-off that came out today for Switch 2. Oh, okay. I didn't know. I didn't know about that. That's pretty cool. Um, okay. I'm gonna quickly. I'm going to start the book up again. With further thanks, Lyndon took his banners. Another disciple was helpful enough to guide him to the quarters for initiates. There was nothing, which were nothing in comparison to his home back in the Wei clan. It was only one room, with a thin mattress and hardly enough space to lie flat. His pack was stuffed with everything he could think to bring, from lights to ink to travel food, but he hadn't brought a change of clothes. Heaven's, Glo- Heaven's Glory School required its disciples to wear clothes indicating their station, and these were provided. Two identical outfits, white and gold, with a red sash, sat folded on top of his thin bed. You receive one spirit fruit and two clear blood elixirs when you arrive, and again every half a year, the disciple reminded him while handing him over his room key. You'll get yours from the outer disciple hall in the morning. It's up the mountain at the very center. The roads head straight for it. Eventually, you'll have duties assigned to you, but for now, you're expected to cycle twice a day and keep practicing your path. Those had the feel of an official declaration, but what he said next sounded much more formal. Watch out for the more advanced disciples. They'll take what they can from you, and if you don't know anyone at the school, they won't hold back. Lyndon took the advice to heart. After the massive ring of light around Mount Samar had begun to dim, but before dawn rose over the peak, Lyndon was already waiting in front of the outer disciple hall. He huddled around one corner, letting the building break the icy wind. Even so, he had to cycle his Madra to keep from shivering. An hour or so later, after the sun peeked over the horizon, a man with a short gray beard and some mixed black in his hair came strolling up to the hall, carrying a heavy key. He stopped when he saw Lyndon, an amused smile on his lips. Wei Shi Lyndon? He asked. Lyndon pressed his fists together and bowed. This disciple is eager to greet you, elder. Only new disciples are so eager. I am Elder Anses, and I will assign you your chores during your stay with us. As though the cold didn't touch him, Anses took his time unlocking the door and the lighting an oil lamp before ushering Lyndon inside. He accepted gladly. The first room of the outer disciple hall was scarcely bigger than Lyndon's room, and packed with rows of shelves, stacked drawers, and desks covered in paper, tablets, and scrolls. There were other doors in the back, but Anses didn't head for them. He squeezed by Lyndon, sliding open a drawer and removing a shallow wooden box from inside. He walked over to his desk and made a note before handing the box to Lyndon. Fate was kind to you. The middle of the year is coming soon, so these won't have to last you long. He slid open the lid, revealing a pair of round pills colored in swirls of blue and white, next to a fruit like a miniature golden pear. These clear blood these clear blood pills are refined from a unique blend of herbs grown only here on the mountain, Anses said, in a tone that suggested he'd given the speech many times. They will remove impurities from your core and from your blood, increasing the speed of your cycling and preparing you to advance to the next stage. Take one and cycle it for at least 3 days before taking the second. Although you may wish to save the second until you're attempting to advance. He pointed at the pear. The spirit fruits we give to disciples are different depending on the year's harvest. Hi, Santi. Welcome in. Welcome in. How's it going? What you up to? Good, good. That's amazing. You're actually not too late. I'm still on chapter 15. But I am almost done with it. Just a couple pages. I don't have to say the reason and I will be late on you week streams. Weekends I'm free. You don't have to say the reason. That's true. I mean, I didn't necessarily I didn't necessarily ask that. I just asked what you were up to. Okay, though. That's fine. Um, let's continue. Well, I know it was school. I mean, I figured it's a weekday. Let's see. The spirit fruits we give to disciples are different depending on the year's harvest, but you're exceptionally lucky this year. One of our elders happened to find a 1,000-year dawn fruit tree just on the other side of the mountain. The dawn fruit has absorbed the vital aura of heaven and earth for centuries, and it will nourish your soul directly. So I can hear a little bit of this story. Oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. Got it. It is still about that time. I recommend you wait. I recommend you wait until completely digesting at least one clear blood pill before eating the fruit. After hearing those descriptions, Lyndon slid the box out of the elder's grip before Anses had quite released it. He slid the lid closed, cradling the box like an infant. My data is being a little less bad right now, but my phone is also low, so I don't know how long I'll last. That's okay, Jade. I appreciate you being here. I hope whatever is happening it fixes quick. Let's see, let's see. Do, do, do. The only thing he wanted to do was run back to his room and cycle, especially before Durette came hunting for him. but he had one question first. Thank you for the hydrate, Jade. An elder found this outside the valley? He actually left Sacred Valley? Elder Anses grimaced. Oh, thank you for the 10 stream streak, Santi. That's awesome. I forgot myself. We try to not speak of the outside world to disciples until they're ready. You've heard that the land outside Sacred Valley is all wild and untamed. You have 4K? Oh, that's awesome. That's really cool. One more stream until I get to 25 days? Dang, that's crazy. Wow, good job. Lyndon nodded. But you have also heard that there are people living outside. I have. His clan had sold crates of orris fruits to the Fallen Leaf School for generations, and always they were told that the fruit was a delicacy to the people outside the valley. As a child, Lyndon had never thought particularly hard about how people living in the forsaken wilderness could afford to buy sweet delicacies. Oh, okay. We'll drink a little more water and then I'll do it. Alright. Wait, hold please. I'm gonna take over something. Sorry, I had a really bad cough just now. Okay. I will do it real quick. Oh wow, that was weird. Ooh, that hurt. Okay. There you go. I gave you your barks. Let's see. Then you are better informed than most, Anses said. Many families don't tell their children that there's anything beyond the mountains, and for good reason. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing an arm that had been absolutely mangled. Huge chunks of flesh were missing from the forearm, so that Lyndon could see the tendons and bone. Not a chihuahua, no. Just small dog, not chihuahua. I'm not. No, no. No way. Not me. I'm not a demon. Okay. Huge chunks of flesh were missing from the forearm, so that Lyndon could see the tendons and bone pressing directly underneath the skin. The upper arm, just under the shoulder, had been shredded by what looked like 3 claws. It had clearly happened years ago, as the skin had grown back and the man's hand was in perfect working condition. But the shock of the sight was a slap. All right. Um, Unperturbed, the elder slowly rolled his sleeves back down. I've been outside Sacred Valley for a total of. Oh, wait. That is not the right voice. I've been outside Sacred Valley for a total of 6 hours. I was lucky not to lose an arm. The man who discovered the gold fruit tree disappeared after returning 4 baskets of fruit to the school. He said he was checking the tree one more time, and he never came back. People live out there? Lyndon asked in a hushed whisper. If it wasn't safe for a jade, how could anyone raise children? Only nomads, he said dismissively. Barbarians. They have tamed some sacred beasts, and they roam around in caravans, avoiding the greatest dangers. They're hardly better than remnants themselves, acting according to their base instincts with no civilization to speak of. Only savages can live in such a savage land, while culture flourishes here. He gave Linton a fatherly smile. Be grateful for what you have. I expect you to work hard, use those resources well, and advance to copper before Sunday. As Lyndon left the outer disciple hall, his imagination swam with thoughts of barbarian nomads and their tame sacred beasts, living in a land so harsh that the Jade Elder of a powerful sacred art school could only survive for hours. He imagined wilderness stretching on to the end of the world. That may have been what the Heaven's Glory School believed, but he knew better. Well, is it time for you to go, Santi? Yep, that makes sense. Well, I hope the rest of school goes well. And maybe we'll see you before the end of chapter 17. Who knows? Suriel had shown him palaces the size of the whole valley, vast courts, paved roads, and rugged taverns. Civilizations had taken root somewhere else, not just here, and he'd been the first person from Sacred Valley to see it. Oh, yeah, you'll be back before the end of chapter 17. It'll take me roughly the next 2 hours to finish, anyways. This chapter has a couple pages left. But yeah, see ya. Have a good rest of your school day. Yeren and the Sword Sage had come into the valley from the outside after all. With her guiding him, why couldn't he make it? He pictured a savage beast, all teeth and gleaming claws, leaping out of the dark trees and shredding his arm until it looked like Elder Ansie's. If he thought about it too long, he'd lose his courage, so he focused on the elixirs in his arms instead. Under the dawn light, he made his way back to his room with the dreams of copper filling his head. These pills were the sort of medicine that the Wei clan had never been able to afford, and the spirit fruit was beyond anything he'd ever heard of. 1,000 years worth of vital aura? And they had so many they could afford to give some to disciples? The ancestral orris fruit would be nothing next to this. He had the box tucked under one arm and one hand on his door when something smashed into the side of his chin. Pain flowered in his head as though his jaw had cracked, swallowing his vision. The box tumbled open, sending the blue and white pills spilling onto the ground. Weakly, he reached out a hand for them. They were far too valuable to let them get dirty. A hand reached down past him, plucking both pills from the ground. It gathered up the box as well, which still contained the golden fruit, and lifted them all out of Lyndon's vision. Those are mine, Lyndon tried to say, but his jaw felt as though someone had stuffed it with live coals. Through watery eyes, he squinted into the dawn-lit sky. Kazan Ma Duret loomed over him, brown hair hanging down into his eyes, iron badge heavy and black against his chest. Before he spoke a word, Duret lashed out with a foot. Lyndon curled up in instinctive reaction, but the kick still landed, slamming into his ribs and arm like an iron had driven a spike through his elbow into his chest. He gasped for breath, but his lungs wouldn't cooperate. If this was Kazan territory, you'd be dead. Duret spat, and something warm and wet splattered against Lyndon's cheek. He was in far too much pain to even wipe it away. On Sunday, you'll bring another box for me. If you make me come down here and pick it up yourself, I might lose my temper. Do you understand me? Lyndon nodded with his cheek pressed against dirty stone, even though every tiny motion of his head was agony. Durrett snorted in disgust, tossing the empty box down so it clattered next to Lyndon's face. He stepped heavily on Lyndon's arm as he walked away. His footsteps retreated into the distance as Lyndon was swallowed by pain and shame. It was one thing to having everyone know you were weak, but it was many times worse to be beaten like a stray dog and left in the street. He wished desperately to lose consciousness. Instead, he heard the murmurs of disciples around him. They whispered to one another, but he still caught snatches of their conversation. It was exactly as he'd expected. Both new disciples? Too weak. Unsouled? Finally, hands lifted him up by the shoulders, causing him to groan in pain. It was all he could do to avoid screaming. Hold on, the boy carrying him said, and Lyndon recognized his voice. It was the disciple that had delivered him to his room the day before. I'm taking you to the medicine hall. Lyndon wondered how many halls there were in the Heaven's Glory School, but idle thoughts didn't survive long amid the sea of pain. The disciple had lifted him off the ground and was carrying him over one shoulder, which was no doubt easy for someone with iron strength. But every step sent agony shooting through Lyndon's body. I thought something like this might happen, the disciple went on. I was going to take you to see Elder Anses myself, so no one singled you out. But I didn't think it'd be too late. Lyndon tried to say I was stupid, but it came out as stupid. The disciple grunted. They let the disciples compete against each other for everything. The strongest rise to the top, and they only want the strongest. As long as nobody dies, the elders don't care. But I don't know why they let an unsouled in here. Even the coppers will be eyeing you. He ascended some steps, which Lyndon's ribs did not appreciate, and then a pair of doors swung open. The smell that wafted out was equal parts metallic blood, putrid sickness, and a sharp herbal scent that Lyndon associated with medicine. The moans and muffled screams within were less than comforting. Another casualty? A man asked. No, this wasn't her. Lyndon's benefactor laid him down on the bed gently, but the impact still made him choke back a shout. New disciple, he added. Ah, leave him here. We've got limbs to sew back on first. The disciple tossed a blanket over Lyndon and hesitated before leaving. Gratitude, Lyndon said, but it passed through his injured jaw in a garbled mess of syllables. The disciple looked at him as though debating whether to say something or not. Finally, he let out a heavy breath and leaned closer. Listen, they don't let disciples leave once they're here, not unless something goes really wrong. But I don't think the elders would chase you down if you just left. You're from a clan, so go home. You won't die here, but you might find that you want to. He left, leaving Lyndon thinking fond thoughts of home. His bed was soft, the air didn't have this permanent chill, and while no one treated him with any respect, they didn't beat him in the streets either. And this was only the beginning of his journey. The outside world was 1,000 times more dangerous. Lyndon's bed was not private. Crammed as it was between dozens of other beds filled with men and women with injuries at least as bad as his own. As his heart grew heavy and he blinked away tears of self-pity, he couldn't help overhearing a conversation from the bed only inches away. We had her cornered, the girl said through gritted teeth. She was, go slower, that burns, backed up against a cave. 15 of us, one of her. Then she drew her sword and we were all cut.
Was she that fast? A woman asked. Bite down on this. It will sting. A minute or so passed with the girl groaning in pain before she finally responded. Not fast. She's not an enforcer, I think. Probably a ruler? And she drew her sword. We were all cut. Out of nowhere. She didn't move. The sage was an enforcer. What? The sage was an enforcer. Would he take a disciple with a different spirit? How can I guess the thoughts of a sword sage? But she cut 15 of us to the bone in one move. Then she ran away. A few enforcers followed her, since they held up better than the rest of us. Linton gingerly craned his neck to the side, speaking as clearly as he could. Forgive my curiosity. Where was this? I'm trying to do a good impression of a pained speech, but it's a little more difficult than I was expecting. All right, I'm gonna pause right there real quick. I need to go get some more water. I will be right back. It'll be about 3 minutes. I think I'm gonna run and add while I wait, while I'm gone. Be right back.
All right, guys. I am back. I'm so sorry for the extra long break. I had to do a little bit of talking with some stuff because I actually have a small concern and yeah. So I won't get into it actually. It's not something that I need to go into on stream. It's something that can be dealt with outside of that. All right. Well, I think I've got everything good. Let me make sure. Everything, everything all fine and dandy. I think so. Okay. Sorry, one moment. Okay. Chapter 16. A woman of about 40 carried. Oh, let me retry that. Thank you, Rain. How's it going? I'm guessing you are at work and just hanging out. A woman of about 40 carried a fistful of wild grass in one hand and a knife in the other. She leaned over the girl in the bed, smearing the paste on the girl's wounds with the flat of her blade. The disciple's face was red and covered in sweat, but both of them looked over at Lyndon's words. He shifted position to make sure his badge was hidden beneath the sheet, so the girl would assume he was a fellow Iron. It must have worked, because her tone became defensive immediately. We almost had her. Our rulers put down a barrier formation to stop her from escaping, but if she's not Jade already, then her sword must be some kind of treasure. She could have Oh wait, I have to do the swollen mouth voice. She couldn't have escaped you without some dirty trick, Lyndon said. Uh, maybe I could try that better. She, let's experiment a little bit. She couldn't have she couldn't have escaped. She couldn't have escaped without some dirty trick. Kind of like that. Maybe a little. Hmm. I don't. Maybe I'm not. What do I try this? She couldn't have escaped you without some dirty trick. Kind of like that. Lyndon said. He'd learned years ago how to flatter a sacred artist's ego. But the pressure of speaking clearly was burning his jaw. He tried to shorten his sentences as much as possible. I'm tracking her down. Where did you see her? Something of a lisp had crept into his voice by the end, and he had to cut it off. He had to cut off the last word before pain brought tears back to his eyes. Hearing this, the girl looked at him in sympathy. Did you run into her after us? Heavens grant you favor, but I'm not going after her again. My pride isn't worth my life. She hissed as the healer applied another dose of the paste. The woman spoke. The woman spoke with the tone of someone who had great experience. Pride is more important than you think. The elders haven't acted against the girl because it lowers their status to treat a disciple as a threat. But now she's killed 6 irons and incapacitated nigh on 40. At this rate, we won't have anyone left in the whole body by Sunday. Which elder would lower their station to fight a disciple? At a certain age, pride is all you have left. Lyndon tried to speak, but his mouth might as well have been wired shut. The healer noticed and put her herbs down, rinsing her hands in a nearby basin. She moved over to Lyndon's side, cold fingers probing the side of his face. The injured girl winced as she shifted position. If you want to go after her, you'll be going by yourself. I don't know anyone else who's willing to risk their lives for it by this point, no matter how much the elders are offering. We saw her in a cave on the north side of the mountain, a few miles up from the ancestor's tomb, but don't know how she survives the remnants out there every night. Samara's ring gathers them like flies to honey. The healer poked at his ribs, making him grunt in pain, and then tested his elbow. Nothing's broken, she announced. You're lucky. You'd heal in a few weeks on your own, but we just got a delivery of herbs from down in the valley. Had extra thorn grass, so we made a batch of these. Elder's orders. Anyone who has to fight against the sword disciple gets one of these to bring them back into fighting shape. She pinched a tiny pill between her thumb and forefinger. It was red and green, and it smelled so sharp he thought his nose would bleed. This won't this won't do anything for your spirit, and you won't like the way it feels, but cycle it for a few days, and if you didn't feel fresh as a copper in 3 dawns, come back and see me. The problem might be deeper than I thought. Lyndon gave her the hint of a bow, which was the best he could manage from his seated position, with his ribs as tender as they were. She accepted it, bowing back, and handed him the pill. Taking it was almost worse than the beating. He swallowed it and began cycling, and only seconds later, it felt as though needles were prickling the inside of his skin. He broke into a sweat, cycling faster, focusing his madra on the areas that needed healing. In only 2 or 3 breaths' time, he wanted to quit. Oh, my neck is stiff. The girl next to him looked on with sympathy. I had one of those already. All the more reason not to go after her again. Because it helps if you cycle it a little at a time. Takes a day or two longer, but it's not as much of a torture. Lyndon appreciated the advice, but he couldn't answer. He forced the pill's energy through his veins, pushing his spirit to the limits, and holding it there through sheer force of will. His earlier melancholy had evaporated. Before, fighting the sword sage's disciple had been a distant thing. Now it was right in front of his eyes. She could take him away from Sacred Valley, and that was his only hope. As long as he stayed here, there would always be another Kazan Maderet. He would never be anything more than unsouled. All day and into the night, Lyndon cycled. It never stopped prickling him from the inside out, but he let the pain wash through him. If this was all he had to endure to escape his life, he would consider it a small price to pay. Whitehall stood before the other elders in the Heaven's Glory School. It was rare enough that they would all gather at once. even the elders from the various halls, but the sage's disciple was a disaster big enough to warrant their full attention. The room was humble enough, with reed mats on the floor and unadorned walls of orris wood, and each elder knelt on a flat cushion and sipped tea from a mug. This was meant to be a civilized meeting, held in the atmosphere held in an atmosphere of peace and equality. Elder Whitehall stood in the center, having accepted neither cushion nor tea. Peace did not fit his agenda here. Every jade in the Heaven's Glory School is in this room. We can march on the tomb right now together. Even if the Sword Sage had been a gold, his remnant would be no match for all of us combined. Several of the elders exchanged glances, and many others simply sipped their tea in silence. They didn't take him seriously, he knew. How could they? When he spoke with the squeaky lilt of an 8-year-old throwing a tantrum, "We would not lightly disturb the ancestors' rest," the Grand Elder said. The Grand Elder served a role in the school, not unlike that of a patriarch or matriarch of a clan. And the Grand Elder of the Heaven's Glory School was perhaps the most powerful jade he'd ever personally seen in action. Even the Sword Sage, that strange wanderer from outside, had expressed admiration for their Grand Elder's accomplishments. Is the Is the ancestors' rest not disturbed by the presence of another corpse, or the wild remnant accompanying it? Whitehall countered. I do not understand why you haven't cleared the tomb already. You were not you were not here, Elder Rum said, sounding as though his voice might crumble to dust. We acted against the sage for the good of the school, but he was far more powerful than we expected. I still have not recovered from the injury he left to my spirit, and I was luckier than some of our brothers and sisters. Whitehall had not missed that. There were 3 or 4 gaps around the room, places where jades had not survived their ambush of the sword sage. And as Whitehall understood it, they had attacked full force while the man slept. Even so, the sage had left a number of casualties. Their tragedy could be Whitehall's great fortune, if he placed his pieces just right. I wasn't there. That is why I am all the more eager to do my part. If only a few of you accompany me, or even allow me to bring a group of irons, I will survey the tomb and return. Together we can devise a way to retrieve the stranger's treasures and his sword. Whitehall was far more interested in the rare sacred herbs the sword sage had always carried on his person, but he knew that many of the other elders coveted the man's sword. The sage had performed miracles with that blade, and they believed that an artifact of such power could form the cornerstone of their entire school. Jeez. So it baffled Whitehall that they had simply left the weapon where it lay. Elder Anses rubbed a hand Elder Anses rubbed a hand along his short beard, as though to emphasize that Whitehall could no longer grow one. That's more complicated than you perhaps think. The remnant has the sword. Whitehall stared at him, searching for any signs of a joke. Remnants did not use weapons. Even the remnant of such a powerful warrior, made up of entirely sword aspect Madra, would grow its own blade rather than picking one up. Remnants could advance over time, just like humans and sacred beasts, but it was a joke to think that one could advance so far so fast. It's that stable? He asked, looking to the Grand Elder for confirmation.
The Grand Elder was at least as old as Elder Rom, but age had not diminished him. He was a mountain of a man, a huge slab of muscle that took up twice the space of anyone else. We tried to lay a boundary formation to force it out, the Grand Elder said. It used the sword to destroy the first banner. Every time we tried to lay a script, it either broke the script or broke the one laying it. Remnants could speak and reason and make deals, but they were very narrow in scope. They had only fragments of their memories from life, and could understand nothing outside of those memories. They were shadows, nothing more, even if they did gain more detail over time. But this one had proven itself capable of understanding script, planning action against it, and striking its enemies' weak points. It was thinking strategically. Is it even a remnant? Whitehall asked. It is, one of the other elders responded. Its appearance is very clear, but we had a soulsmith scan it anyways, in case the sword sage had simply used a technique to somehow imitate a remnant. We're confident this isn't the case. It has simply left a remnant that is far, far beyond anything we've ever seen. Whitehall's mind staggered at the thought. To leave such a remnant, the sword sage might actually have reached the gold stage. His desire for those secret herbs redoubled. Anything of gold carried on his person would be a priceless treasure. I now understand, Whitehall said. And he did. A gold remnant was the stuff of legends and nightmares. The elders would have to tread cautiously, in case the spirit had the ability to destroy their entire school. You were wise to treat the situation with such care, and I spoke from ignorance. He bowed to the Grand Elder in apology. But what about the girl? His disciple. If the remnant remembers her, we might lure it away from the corpse. He had very little impression of the sword sage's disciple. She had always followed him around, but at the time, Whitehall had thought of the sage as nothing more than a wandering jade. As such, his disciple wouldn't be anything special, but if he was a gold expert, the picture changed. Another elder, an old woman with a completely shaven head, sighed. We have spent practically every combat capable iron in the school against her for weeks now. She sends them back dead or wounded. We planned on exhausting her spirit, pressuring her until she broke, but our disciples might be the ones to break first. Now that we know how powerful the sword sage was, it makes some sense. A Galt's disciple must be extraordinary. Whitehall had just apologized, so it would be unbecoming of his dignity to make a scene. But it was hard to hold himself back when he heard this stupidity. The irons failed to capture her, so you sent more irons? The Grand Elder rumbled deep in his chest. The enemy is only a disciple, and a young girl. Which elder from the Heaven's Glory School would throw away their face to deal personally with a child? Elder Whitehall very carefully stopped himself before exploding. This was a good thing for him, he reminded himself, and their foolishness was to his advantage. He still felt like strangling every one of them. This elder does. The sword sage's treasures could make us the strongest power in the valley, or his remnant could ruin us. This concerns the survival of our school. How can I value my pride over that? It is not our pride that concerns us, Elder Rum said, but the honor of the Heaven's Glory School. Without its reputation, a school is nothing. The clans will send their young geniuses to the fallen leaf or the holy wind, and we will be forced to harvest all our sacred herbs in our own gardens. Even the outsider nomads might not deal with us if they did not trust in our honor. Whitehall waved a hand at himself. Then let a child deal with a child. The pride of the school is untarnished, yes? The other elders shifted, uncomfortable, but none of them spoke out. He knew how their minds worked. Elder Whitehall's condition was not common knowledge outside of this room. They allowed all outside parties to assume that he was really a precocious genius that had managed to achieve Jade at a preposterously young age. His plan wasn't honorable because it meant propping their reputation up on a misconception. Therefore, none of them wanted to be the first to agree. But it would work, so none of them tore it down either. They each waited for someone else to give in first. You may do as you see fit, the Grand Elder said, which was the least enthusiastic approval Whitehall had ever received. But it didn't matter, so long as he was allowed to do as he liked. I'll need irons that have fought the girl in the past, he said, as well as some fresh ones. A group of 5. Wait. A group of 5 will be released from the Hall of Healing tomorrow morning. I'll have them report to you. As for your fresh fighters, didn't you bring in a pair yourself only yesterday? Whitehall almost hated to admit that Lyndon had been one of his, but since the elders already knew, there was no sense in denying it. Yes, Grand Elder. Take them as well. It will be good education for them, however it turns out. None of them were worried about the safety of the new disciples. There was a Jade along, after all. The matter was practically settled. Whitehall would work with what he had. Kazan Madaret was appreciably strong, and a forger. He had learned the path of the mountain's heart, so he would never walk the path of heaven's glory. But he could still benefit the school. He could build walls, which ought to help back the girl into a corner. The Sword Sage's disciple wouldn't be short of weapons or secret techniques, but now she was out of options. It was the middle of the night when Lyndon shocked himself out of his cycling trance, and the light from Samara's ring cast an eerie light over the interior of the Hall of Healing. He'd grown up with the ring overhead every night, but down in the valley, it didn't actually provide much light. It was only an interesting feature of the skyline. Here, it acted like a full moon, but its light was thin, somehow stretched, giving the surroundings a pale and dreamy quality. All of the other patients had collapsed into an exhausted sleep, and even the healer on duty was slumped against the wall at the far end of the room. She had exhausted her spirit dealing with the wave of wounded. Lyndon wasn't sure how he had managed to stay awake. His clothes and sheets were drenched in sweat, and while the thorns under his skin had lessened in intensity, his veins still itched. His Madra was ebbing low, so that if he did too much more tonight, he would overdraw his spirit and be trapped in the bed for days. Even his head pounded after hours of concentrating, stuck cycling. But he hadn't given up. He opened his mouth wide, stretching his jaw. It was still tender, but not nearly as painful as when he'd come in. Even his ribs and his arm felt merely bruised, not shattered as they had at first. If his energy held out, he would be able to walk. He wanted nothing more than to rest his wounds and his soul, but he knew now was the time. The previous group of irons to go up against Yeren had come back defeated, and the next batch wouldn't leave until the morning. He had tonight, and only tonight, to find her. Lyndon staggered onto unsteady legs, using the corner of his bed as a crutch. The air was even colder than he expected, so he snagged an outer robe from another sleeping patient. The disciple wouldn't miss it. He hobbled home as fast as he could, gaining strength slowly as he moved. The pale light cast everything in a strange hue, especially the rainstone buildings, which now looked as though they had been dipped in milk. Samara's ring was as thick as his arm in the sky. stretching from horizon to horizon, like a river of light. Being up here, under the ring, surrounded by constructs of gleaming white, he was once again struck by the majesty of the Heaven's Glory School. It really was like living among a village in the heavens. I wonder what they do to traitors in the heavens, Lyndon thought as he reached his room, quickly ducking inside to grab his pack with the formation banners within. Cast them back down, probably. After a moment's thought, he brought along his second set of disciple robes as well. If they had some punishment here, casting him down would likely involve tossing him off the mountain. The easiest way to avoid that was to avoid getting caught, so Lyndon tucked away his wooden badge inside his clothes. He couldn't leave it behind in case he had to prove his identity, but wearing it openly would be as good as painting his name on his clothes. There was only one unsouled in the school. With a last longing glance back at his rigid bed, Lyndon set out into the frigid night, hitching his pack up onto his shoulders. The patches of snow became more frequent as he made his way up the mountain and to the north. The scraggly trees grew closer together, and he even caught a glimpse of a few remnants. A flash of glowing antlers or a flicker of vivid green scales. Most of the remnants up here carried aspects of light, which was why they were attracted to Samara's ring. His mother had taught him that when he was a child, they drank from it as humans did from a river. But as a result, the Heaven's Glory territory wasn't safe at night. Wild remnants wouldn't necessarily attack him, but it was impossible to predict what a wild remnant would do. They might shred him to pieces, ignore him, bite him once and run off, shine a light in his eyes, drag him back to a cave and imprison him, or swear eternal loyalty to him on sight. If you didn't know a remnant, you had to treat it as though it were capable of anything. Lyndon wished desperately for a drudge. There had been a low-grade drudge in the lesser treasure hall, and he had passed it up only because he wasn't a soulsmith. Not only could he have set the drudge to follow Sword Madra, it would have warned him away from any especially dangerous remnants, and given him some options to defend himself if he were attacked. As it was now, he had to risk it. The possibility kept him dancing on the edge of a knife, scanning every shadow and freezing at the sight of every spirit. If they looked even slightly aggressive, he would have to run for his life, dropping a crystal flask as a distraction. As the night stretched on, his vigilance scraped his nerves clean, until his eyes felt frozen wide and his ears seemed to tremble at every sound. He didn't know how many hours he'd spent out here alone in the cold and wind, but it felt like days. As he staggered forward with every step, he lost a little more feeling in his legs. Finally, on the jagged slope overlooking the unnatural chasm, he stopped. He'd been wandering around on vague instructions the whole night, every once in a while calling out Yaren's name and hoping she heard it before a remnant did. He knew how unlikely it was to work, and had long since resigned himself to as many nights of this as he could physically survive. But now, new breath filled his lungs as he realized. He recognized this place. This is where he'd seen Yaren in the first place, in Suriel's vision. The chasm was only about 20 feet deep, with a flat bottom covered in snow. The girl in black and red had been backed up against the end of the chasm, defending herself from Heaven's Glory disciples. Looking around, he saw some evidence of the battle. A discarded sword, partially revealed by a pile of snow, gleaming where it had fallen. A bloody cloth wrapped around a tree branch. a mirror smooth stretch of rock where the stone had been sliced clean through. It felt strange to see this in person. He had never really doubted Suriel's visions, but without confirmation they remained unreal, like particularly vivid dreams. Now he had proof in front of his eyes. The sight strengthened his flagging spirit, and he scanned for a way down. It wasn't easy, unless he was meant to backtrack almost half a mile to check and see if there was a smoother entrance. He certainly wasn't going to jump 20 feet down onto ground covered. Oh, hold on. Onto ground covered in snow. As far as he knew, there were jagged weapons coating the ground down there, and he would land right on a rusty spearhead. Oh my gosh. How many more pages are there? About 6 pages left in chapter 16. Oh, chapter 17 so long. Okay. He finally decided to climb down, but before he did, he called as loud as he dared into the chasm. Yeren! No one answered him. There wasn't any room down there for anyone to hide anyway, not unless she'd buried herself in the snow. But he had to look. Maybe he would find something. Just finding this place had been a major encouragement, so even a piece of her robe would be welcome. He gripped cold stone in both hands and climbed down slowly and gingerly, favoring his ribs. When he finally reached the bottom, he discovered nothing. The chasm was even smaller than it had looked from above, and he could see the whole thing in one glance. It did cut the wind nicely, and he spent a moment huddled in his own arms, enjoying the relative warmth. Yeren clearly wasn't here, and he had wasted most of the night already. On top of which, he was now faced with a 20-foot climb back up. Well, although Suriel had promised him great opportunities outside of Sacred Valley, she had never said they would be easy. A great sacred artist a great sacred artist wouldn't complain about something like this, he reminded himself, and steeled his body for the climb. A cold point pressed against the underside of his chin, and he dropped his pack to the snow. I'd bet my soul on a rat's tail that I never told you my name, a girl said. He'd never heard an accent like hers before, which was further proof that she was really from beyond Sacred Valley. Though he had a sword at his throat, Lyndon still felt relief. He'd actually found her. Yeren? Yeren? Your elders never asked. Wait, no, not. I don't want to do British or Australian. Definitely not. That's a different accent. That'll come later. Your elders never asked my name, and I'd contend that you and I never crossed eyes before now. How do you know me? Lyndon had considered several lies on the way here, but he needed Yeren to guide him voluntarily. He needed her on his side, which meant he had to rely on the truth, such as it was. The heavens showed me. I need to drink a little bit of water. The heavens showed me, he said. The wind whistled over the chasm until the quiet became painful. Finally, she leaned around to get a peek at his face, though he couldn't see much of an expression through her black hair. You chipped in the head? It sounds like I'm spinning you a story. I understand that. We don't know each other. You've never met me. You don't trust me, and that's wise. Why should you? He took a risk and started to turn, but stopped when the point stuck deeper into his skin. Lyndon swallowed. Nothing like a sword to the neck to keep a man honest. Let me tell you why you should. How else did I know you? How did I know you were here? If I were trying to kill you, would I come out here shouting your name? A name that school elders don't even know? So how would I get it? It's impossible. She didn't say anything, and she didn't kill him, so he took that as encouragement. An immortal descended from heaven and told me your name, showed me this place. You were backed up against the wall, fighting a group of heaven's glory irons. Yaren's sword ran lightly down his throat to the silk around his neck. It tugged upwards, dragging his badge out of his clothes. So, you were with the last. Wait, no. So you were with the. No. You chipped in the head. I gotta work. I gotta get Yaren's accent down. I'll go back to a last line. You chipped in the head? So, you were with the last. No, that's not right. I don't like that. You were with the last bunch that tracked me down. That's a pill I can swallow. They never made it to this place, but there was a group of strikers in the back that I never. The badge emerged, but instead of an iron arrow, it displayed a single character carved in wood. Unsouled? See? Not a striker. Lyndon took a moment to slide away from the sword, which was now pointed at his chest. Did you whittle a fake badge just to pull this trick on me? She didn't sound convinced, and Lyndon took the risk of letting out a small laugh. I tried to carve a fake badge once. It's harder than you think. I cut my thumb so deep they had to stitch it closed. The sword moved away from his chest, and Lyndon slowly turned around. For the second time that night, he was hit with the cold water shock of coming face to face with something that Suriel had shown him. Yeren was just as he'd seen in her. Yeren was just as he'd seen in the vision. A ragged warrior with shredded black robes and blade-straight hair. This close, he could see the hair-thin scars crossing her face, the threads in the blood-red rope tied around her waist like a thick belt. She held a long sword as though she'd forgotten it was in her hand. All the details were the same, but she looked like a girl on the edge of death. Her eyes were wide and bloodshot, her lips cracked, her cheeks purpled with bruises, her robes caked with dirt. Her sword was steady, but her knuckles were white on the hilt, as though she strained with her entire being to keep from dropping it. She looked, in short, like a young woman who had spent the last weeks on the run in the wilderness. He should have expected it, but she had seemed healthy in the vision, and nothing in her voice had led him to expect this. Something in his gaze must have given him away, because she tilted her sword up. I'm not so weak I can't kill a man on his own, even if you are Jade. Lyndon spread his palms, showing them empty. You could be fast asleep and kill me. I have no strength to hide. He glanced up at the sky over the chasm, where Samara's ring had begun to fade. They'll be sending more disciples after you today, and this time I think they're finally done underestimating you. Let's work together. Her expression darkened as she looked at his disciples' robes, and she held the sword so steady that it unnerved him. I don't hold deals with the Heaven's Glory School. I still don't think I like that. I don't hold deals with the Heaven's Glory School. I like that. That's the voice I like. Okay. For Urine. Lyndon hurried to clarify. I've only made some arrangements with them myself. I wouldn't call them deals, maybe dealings, but that's over now. I'm done. I've gotten what I can out of them. Time to leave them behind. She squinted at him, her weapon wavering. Let me paint this scene for you. I need to get out of Sacred Valley, and you need to get away from Heaven's Glory. We can help each other get what we want. She she sheathed the sword in one smooth motion, but kept her hand resting on the hilt. First off, tell me straight, are you a disciple of the Heaven's Glory School? I tricked my way in, he said. It's only been 2 days, and they've tried to kick me out at least 3 times. What about what about the badge? It's real, too real. I only wanted in this school to find you. The celestial messenger said that you had a way out. He felt a little foolish saying it out loud like that, but it was the truth. She drummed her fingers on her sword, then added, I'll be cutting through Heaven's Glory until I get what I want or they've run out of blood. That bother you any? Do you have a grudge against the Way Clan? Who? He gave her a friendly smile, hoping it looked sincere. Then we have no grudges between us. I owe Heaven's Glory nothing. Burn them down and scrub the mountain clean. It has nothing to do with me. She looked into his eyes for what felt like a long time, and then she relaxed. Rather than relaxed, it was as though every muscle in her body gave up at the same moment. She slumped down onto a patch of snow, leaning up against the chasm wall. The dark bruises on her face stood out in stark contrast to the mesh of silken scars. It's plain you're lying, but I don't know how or why. This would be the worst possible trap Heaven's Glory would set. That didn't sound right. This would be the worst possible trap Heaven's Glory would set. Apologies, but let me assure you that this is not a trap. I want us to work together, and I wouldn't start a bond like that with a lie. With her eyes closed, she stuck out a hand. Even that was covered in a network of scars, from wrist to fingertips. Swear on your soul? He froze as though the hand itself were a trap. I'm sorry? We both swear on our souls, and we can trust each other. Maybe you're lying and maybe you're not. But once we both swear, then we're hitched to the same wagon. Lyndon wasn't clear about what would happen if he violated an oath on his soul, because no one spoke about it. He'd only heard rumors of sacred artists swearing such vows, and normally only in legends. Still, the rumors agreed on one thing. The more powerful your spirit, the more binding the oath. At the foundation level, he might escape with only minor damage to his core. As an iron, actually, he wasn't sure what level she'd reached, since she wasn't wearing a badge. As an iron or a jade, her oath would be much more serious. She was taking the bigger risk, and he was dealing in good faith, so there was no reason to refuse. Still, he hesitated. His parents hadn't even sworn to each other on their souls. Even okay. His parents hadn't even sworn to each other on their souls when they were married. Yaren cracked one eye to look at him, and at last he took her hand, gripping her wrist firmly. She gripped his in the same way, only much, much harder. It was all he could do not to wince. He was starting to sweat in spite of the cold, and he hoped she'd call it off since he demonstrated his willingness to swear. We might want to consider this a little longer before he began, but she cut him off. You try your hardest to get me away from Heaven's Glory, and I swear on my soul that I'll take you out of Sacred Valley and keep you safe until you're stable and settled outside. A bit of her madra slid through his hand and slipped into his veins. It felt sharp, like a knife lightly dragged across his skin. He followed her lead, clumsily forcing his madra and follow hers back into her hand. I, Wei Shi Linden, hereby swear on my soul that I will do my best to help Yaren, the disciple of the Sword Sage, escape from the pursuit of the Heaven's Glory School. In return, I expect guidance away from Sacred Valley into the lands beyond, as well as reasonable protection during that time. The heavens didn't descend, and he didn't feel his spirit tighten. His soul did not change. He waited to see if there was any other effect, but Yaren pulled her hand free. You were all shiny and polished about it, but you didn't have to be. Say what you want to say, and your soul will do the rest. Lyndon looked at his hand uncertainly, as though he expected to see the oath etched in his palm. Did it work? It's not a sacred technique. It's a promise. It worked. She leaned her head back against the stone and sighed. Now that we're tied, now that we're tied tight as string on a bow, you can tell me the truth. You were bait. Wait, nope, I'm getting into the wrong accent. Now that we're tied. Now that we're. Nope. Why is this so hard? Now that we're. Nope. That's a different voice that I'm going to use later. Now that we're tied to the same tight as a string on a bow, you can tell me the truth. You were bait, true? Lyndon didn't have much honor to offend, but her repeated doubts in his given word were beginning to wound his pride. I'll swear on my soul again, if that would convince you. A genuine immortal messenger descended from heaven. She squinted at him. Bleed me like a pig. You're not joking. I'm not joking, and I'm not lying. She brought me back from the dead. And she wanted you to save me? This time Yaren didn't sound doubtful, but confused. Maybe a touch hopeful. Lyndon didn't want to correct her, but he'd been honest so far. I'm sure she had many purposes in sending me here, but I do know she wanted you to save me. Even though he thought about hauling her to her feet, but another look at her sword convinced him otherwise. I'd like to get started on that if we can. How far is the road out? She hesitated. So you know. I thought you were with them. You believe me now, though, don't you? If a soul oath wasn't enough to convince her of his honesty, he didn't know what was. I do. There's a chance you're chipped, and there's a chance you're a prophet. One way or the other, I don't contend that you're lying. But now I regret I didn't warn you about the 7 armed fighters heading our way. Chapter 17. Lyndon's gaze snapped up to the chasm. Where? How do you know? When will they get here? She spun her finger in a circle. I wrap this place tight, information banners. It's not a powerful boundary. It doesn't take much energy, but I'll sense anyone who steps across. It's about half a mile out in every direction. The bigger the boundary, the more complex the formations and the more moderate to operate. An alarm boundary would be among the simplest and easiest types, but he still wouldn't be able to activate one a mile across. He scanned the entire chasm quickly, trying to take stock of their options. You hid from me earlier, so you have to have a hiding place here somewhere. We can wait this out. She pointed to the back of the chasm, where she'd fought off the irons in his vision. Ugh, my neck is stiff. I'm actually gonna run a little break, just cause I need a second to let my voice rest. So I'm gonna run a quick ad break and then we'll continue. Mm.
All right, welcome back from the ad break. And welcome back, Sandy. How's it going? How is the rest of school? Meh, that's fair. I'm just taking a quick break from reading before I start chapter 7. Before I continue chapter 17, I'm like a page and a half in. A lot of work, but I got it done. That's good. That's good. Um, I don't know what it is about the book reading streams, but I always get so tired so fast. Reading is tiring work. Mm. Here in a couple minutes, I will um keep reading chapter 17, and then once chapter 17 is over, I will be ending stream. Because there will only be 3 chapters, the epilogue, and bloopers left in the book. And then we will finish the rest of the book next week. But I made the announcement in the Discord. But today after stream, before I head over to D&D, I'm going to the bookstore and I'm getting the second book physical for Cradle. So that way when we finish it next week, when we finish Unsouled next week, we can start Soulsmith the week after, or maybe take a break from it for a week and then come back to it the week after that. So, okay, give me 1 second to do something and then I will start back up. Okay. Time to continue the book.
She pointed to the back of the chasm where she'd fought off the irons in his vision. Crack is right there, presuming you can see it. It leads to a shallow cave. It's tighter than the skin on a lizard, so you probably won't fit. Found it during that last fight, and I squeeze in there every night to try and chase down some good sleep. So hiding was no good. He could always walk out and pretend he'd gone looking for the Sword Sage's disciple. On his own. He was wearing the Heaven's Glory clothes, so they might believe him, but if anything went wrong, Yeren would have to face 7 sacred artists on her own. All right, he said. Consider this. You hide in the cave, I'll go up there and talk to them, and I'll see if I can lead them in the wrong direction. Where are they now? Yeren slowly stood, but she didn't head for the cave. Her eyes were on the sky, and her hand on her sword. First thing my master taught me about the sacred arts, when the time is right, you shed blood. There's no getting around it. Her words were so cool and matter of fact that they sent a chill through Lyndon's bones. The time isn't right, Lyndon said desperately. He pulled the pile of purple banners out of his pack, rushing around the edges of the chasm and planting them in the snow. I have a boundary formation of my own. We can dig under the snow, hide there, and when they come down, Yeren took one unsteady step towards the wall, her weakness apparent. The wind snatched at her dangling shreds of her robes, and even that much force seemed likely to knock her to the ground. Lyndon didn't see how she could even remain standing, much less fight off 7 attackers. He almost said so. Then she leaped out of the chasm. It looked effortless, as though she had simply begun a step at the bottom of a 20-foot rock wall and finished at the top. Uh, he saw her from behind, her hair and her tattered robes blowing in the wind. Her red rope belt stayed utterly motionless, which attracted his attention until she drew her sword. Hurriedly, Hurriedly, he finished planting the 7 banners and hiding them in snow. If she'd brought her weapons out, that meant a high, young voice rose above the wind, sending Lyndon's spirits even lower. He knew that voice. Your master would be proud of your courage. I can acknowledge that, Elder Whitehall said. And your skill is outstanding for someone of your age. Truly outstanding. You sure you... Wait. You sure you want to talk about age? Yeren retorted. He could see her from below, and now he understood why she cut her hair so straight. No matter how the wind whipped or pulled it, not even a strand covered her eyes. The Heaven's Glory School is lower than I expected. Even dogs don't send their pups to fight. Whitehall's voice turned cold. I'm not trading insults with a disciple. I'm not doing it. I've already lowered myself to come here personally, and even a blind man can see your path ends here. You can hardly stand. You clearly haven't had a whole night's sleep in weeks, and your robes are ruined. You must be freezing. But I'm here because I respect talent. I really do, and so does Heaven's Glory. They need her, Lyndon realized, and a range of new options opened before him. He had assumed they were only trying to eliminate Yeren, which left her with only 2 choices: run or fight. But they wanted her, which meant she had something to trade. She had leverage. A head popped over the chasm and someone glanced down. Just an idle glance, but it was enough to doom Lyndon. Kazan Maderet looked down on him with a face first confused, and then drenched in self-satisfaction. The Unsouled is with her, he called back to Whitehall. Lyndon rubbed his aching jaw. Maybe meeting a messenger from the heavens had used up all his good luck in his life. Because since his visit from Suriel, His fortunes seemed to have gone sour. Weishi Linden? Whitehall said blankly. What? Why? How did he get here? He's with the sage's disciple, Durrett responded, without taking his eyes from Linden. This one humbly requests permission to treat him as an enemy. Permission? I don't care what happens to one or two unsouled. If there were 100 of him, I still wouldn't care. Kill him, leave him there, carry him back on your shoulders. Just don't bother me while I'm working. Yaren tilted her scarred face towards him, though she kept staring off at what must be Whitehall. Can you can you bury him alone? She asked, which sunk his heart into his stomach even farther. He could have pretended he wasn't with her, or that she had kidnapped him. Now, he only had one option. Lyndon smiled up at Durrett. I don't need any help putting. Well, I need some water. I don't need any help putting down a dog. Red brown bricks, forged out of solid madra, condensed in the air behind the Kazana disciple. They fanned out like a bird's tail as he hopped down into the chasm, landing lightly on his feet. Start begging now, Durrett said, while you can. Lyndon let out a breath of deep relief he moved his hand down to the wooden ward key in his belt. It had been even easier than he'd hoped. The strings of a zither filled the air with haunting music, and a transparent avalanche fell from the cliff above. It was clearly fake to Lyndon's eyes, like a portrait overlaid on reality, but Durrett screamed and covered his face with his arm. You forgot already? Lyndon said, and Durrett turned towards the sound of his voice. The white fox boundary distorted his senses, and the iron hurled a forged brick straight at the wall. It's only been 1 day, and I win again with the same trick? Don't they say that even a dog remembers a beating? Durrett roared, flinging another brick at the wall, once again missing Lyndon wildly. Above, the sky turned gold for an instant as a beam of destructive white-gold light flashed into existence. Elder Whitehall shouted to his disciples, and someone screamed. Seconds later, a thin line of blood trickled down the chasm. A nearby thunderclap drew his attention back to Kazan Maderet. The image inside the boundary wasn't entirely clear to Lyndon. Thank you for the hydrate, Dag. Welcome back in. How's it going? How's it going? The the white gold light blasted past again, and this time Lyndon felt the wave of fear on his face. Thank you for the stretch, Rain. Another man's bloody shriek told him that Yaren was holding her own. Just had to finish the paragraph. Thank you for the stretch. I appreciate it. Oh, that felt good. Whew. That was a really good stretch. Wow, dang. Okay. Oh, I feel so good after that. You've been going for a while? Yeah, and that was my first stretch since I started, so that was probably a good thing. Oh, that felt so good. All right. Sorry. A nearby thunderclap drew his attention back to Kazan Majoret. The image inside the boundary wasn't entirely clear to Lyndon, and he certainly wasn't going to drop the word key for a more detailed look, but it seemed as though the iron was contending with an army of razor-clawed crabs. He screamed and scratched at his face as though the illusions were drawing blood, but he wasn't using his bricks against the crabs. He may have fallen for the same trick a second time, but it wasn't as though he'd forgotten. He knew it was a dream, and he only flung Forged Madra in the hopes of hitting Lyndon or destroying the formation. What do I do with him? Lyndon wondered. Setting up the White Fox boundary had been a last-minute act of desperation, and Lyndon hadn't had time to come up with a real plan. Now that he was face to face with an enraged iron, he realized that he didn't know what to do. Last time, he'd only needed to defeat Duret in front of Elder Ram. Immobilizing him in the boundary was just as good as beating him senseless. Now, Lyndon couldn't leave him here. The formation was fueled by a vital aura, but even that would run out eventually. Before that, Duret had good odds of hitting one of the 7 banners with his random thrown bricks. Besides leaving him, what else was there? When the time is right, you shed blood. Like lightning striking inches away, a forged brick smashed into the rock wall beside his head, with all the force of an iron could muster. Hi, Santy. Welcome, welcome. How is it going? Chips stung Lyndon's face, and he flinched away so wildly that he fell to the ground. His ear rang like a struck gong. Any closer, and he would have died. Out of school? That's good. That's good, that's good. For a second time, Duret still roared in the illusion, with no idea how close he'd come to victory. But the brick caused the reality of Lyndon's situation to come crashing down. He had almost died. His story had come within an inch of ending here. The heavens had already intervened once. A celestial messenger had reversed death and caused even time to flow backwards, and none of that would have mattered. I'm kind of bad? What do you mean you're kind of bad? For reasons he didn't understand, he reached into his pocket for Suriel's glass marble. It was warm to the touch, and he rolled it in his fingers as he thought. Oh, you're not okay? Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. If you don't mind talking about it, what's up? One thing was perfectly clear. With Duret sharing this chasm with him, Lyndon was in mortal danger. And he couldn't trust heaven to save him a second time. His gaze was drawn to a spear, abandoned from Yaren's last fight, half buried in the snow. He kept low to avoid any potential flying bricks, crawling over to the weapon and cradling it in both hands. You shed blood. Before he had a chance to inspect the spear, he ran out of time. A brick struck the banner, and the field instantly blew away like mist on the wind. To Lyndon, it really was like watching a cloud drift through the air. But Duret actually staggered as he was jerked from one reality to another. The banner itself wasn't broken, but it had been knocked out of alignment with the rest of the formation. The boundary was gone. In less than a breath, Duret would regain his bearings and turn around, ready to kill. My self-esteem is very low, and I really don't want to do anything. Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that. I hope you feel better really soon. That's never fun to have to deal with. I hope this stream can help you in any way.
Lyndon gathered himself. No matter how he reasoned, there was only one thing to do here. He gripped cold, slick wood in his shaking hands. Rain is such a sweetheart. I'm really glad that my stream helps you, Santi. I'm really really sorry to hear that. Although I don't um it's not that I don't want to hear it. It's that I I'd rather keep the mood of the book reading stream up, and especially cuz this will be a VOD and I don't want anyone watching to get, I guess, out of the mood of listening. But I am really sorry for how you're feeling. But I'm pretty sure a lot of us have that. It's a pretty common thing nowadays. But I think that is a little much for stream. So I would appreciate it if we get off that topic. Thank you. Linton gathered himself. No matter how he reasoned, there was only one thing to do here. He gripped cold, slick wood in shaking hands. Then he stabbed Durette. There was less to it than he'd expected. The first stab was basically like sinking a blade into the earth. He jammed it into Durette's back, then quickly withdrew. The Kazan didn't react until Lyndon pulled the spear out. Then he jerked forward as though something had stung him. He didn't look wounded at all. Lyndon panicked. Durette would turn and hurl a brick through Lyndon's head any second. All I will say, in just to finish this up, is maybe talk to someone who you can like actually talk to. It's never it's never helpful to talk to just random people on the internet, especially streamers, because they can't really talk much. Or well, they can, but generally they don't necessarily want to. So I recommend, that's a good thing. You already talked to your parents. That's really good. If That's all I will say. I'm gonna end the conversation there, and let's please not bring it up. You will say that you were overreacting? Durette would turn and hurl a brick through Lyndon's head at any second, and that would be the end. So he followed the other man forward, stabbing him again and again, expecting any second to end with a missile of forged madra through the skull. With no art, with no skill, Lyndon stabbed Kazan Durette until a bleeding body fell onto the snow-covered ground. He fell with it, swallowing air as though he couldn't get enough, still clutching the spear. And a remnant rose before him, and he choked back bitter tears. Santi, you don't have to leave. I just I just don't necessarily want. Please don't just leave because I asked not to talk about a heavy topic. I just don't want that to be a precedent that we can just talk about heavy topics. You're fine to stay. It's perfectly fine. I just prefer to not talk about heavy topics on stream. I'm not 100% comfortable with that. Yeah, you can stay here. We are a company for you to hang out with while you're dealing with whatever you are dealing with. So you're okay. Yeah, and I do say, you're fine. Just we should stay away from the heavy topics. That way we can keep the mood up and we don't have to worry about anything. Okay? Made of Mountain's heart power, this remnant was like the outline of an ogre painted in dirt. It stumbled around for a while, flailing at the air with heavy hands, but it was weak and barely coherent. Lyndon held his eyes open until they watered, afraid to blink. But the remnant never gave any indication that it saw him. It pressed into the wall and oozed away, squeezing into tiny cracks like soft mud. I'm glad I can help. You are appreciated here. Lyndon dropped his weapon as the spirit vanished, panting, his stomach churning. He thought he might be sick. He'd always accepted the fact that he would kill someone someday. Combat was part of the sacred arts, and the clans were encouraged to kill one another within reason. He knew his parents had killed people in their younger days, though they rarely talked about it. Time to the book again. Yep, of course. But there was supposed to be more to it. He'd imagined standing in triumph over a blood enemy, veins pumping with the thrill of battle, proving his superiority in a final showdown, not huddling in the cold, stabbing a blind man. Durette had given him no choice, and besides, the White Elders would have given him a reward for killing a Kazan Iron. No one would blame him. If he had hesitated, even for another second, he would have certainly died. Even so, he kept his eyes off the body. Despite what he'd been told as a child, there was nothing to celebrate here. Another flash of gold light, this time sweeping in a horizontal arc, and Elder Whitehall shouted, "Stop her! Hold her down!" A black and red blur flashed over the chasm as Yaren leapt.
leapt past. Lyndon snapped himself back to reality, rushing to collect his formation banners. He didn't look forward to killing anyone else, but leaving an ally to fight alone was the act of a coward. He had to at least try something, even if he was too weak to contribute much. Once he'd gathered up all the banners, he slipped them inside his outer robe and steadied his grip on the jagged stone wall. His vision was swimming. The day of cycling, the night without sleep, the strain on his madra, and the burden of his emotions were all getting to be too much for him. One more stretch, he said, focusing on the climb in front of him. He forced himself to forget the march out of Sacred Valley. Just this one last thing, and then I can sleep. Inch by inch, he hauled himself up. At the top, the patchy snow had been sprayed pink. Heaven's Glory disciples lay here and there, mostly wounded, a few probably dead. One held pressure on a deep gash in his arm, his face pale. He stared straight at Lyndon, but seemed to see nothing, only rocking back and forth. Sorry, give me one moment. Okay. Elder Whitehall landed in a crouch at the bottom of a tree, snow flying away from him in a ring. He whipped a line of golden light forward, and the beam slashed through the tree in front of him, dividing it in two. Dividing it into two charred and smoking halves. It creaked as it toppled, sending splinters spraying into the air. The attack left deep, blackened gouges in the other trees nearby, but none of them collapsed. Yeren slipped out from behind one of those trunks, her sword flashing. A thin wave of distortion blew outward from her weapon, like the edge of a gleaming sickle. Elder Whitehall ducked, and the sword Madra sliced deep into a boulder behind him. He gathered light to a point in his hand, but she had already disappeared. Lyndon prepared to jump back into the chasm. He had only ever had personal experience with one path, and while the elders of his clan could do some astonishing things with illusions, they'd never displayed anything like this. This was a true battle between Jades, and he would be safer if he hid until it was over. Then again, Suriel had suggested that by leaving the valley, he could gain power even beyond gold. The very idea beggared his imagination, but that only meant his imagination was too limited. He hadn't seen enough, hadn't experienced enough. If he wanted to travel his own path to its end, he had to do so with eyes wide open. At that moment, Elder Whitehall spotted him. The elder snarled, whipping a scorching stream of light Lyndon's way. Lyndon released the stone, letting himself fall, hoping it would be fast enough. As he did, he glimpsed a slender figure in black robes leaping up behind the childlike elder, sword bared. He landed heavily on his back. Wind knocked from his lungs, even as he gasped for breath. He was grateful for the snow and his pack cushioning his fall, but he hoped he hadn't broken anything, especially his ribs. Even the thorngrass pill had started acting up, tingling in the most unpleasant way around his injuries. When he finally caught his breath again, the world outside the chasm was silent. Samara's ring had all but vanished, and the sun had slipped a peak over the mountain. Only the wind continued, an unending and invisible stream. With agonizing care, Lyndon prodded his flagging body into yet another climb. Yeren stood at the top of the chasm, loose hair flying in her face, panting heavily and leaning on her sheathed sword as a walking stick. Lyndon glanced hurriedly around for Elder Whitehall. Where did he go? She evened her breathing before responding. Deeper in, other side of the mountain. He's bleeding like a butchered hog, but he'll be coming back. Lyndon hauled himself out of the chasm, hoping he didn't look as bad as she did, but knowing that he was probably worse. You really drove off an elder of and 6 iron disciples by yourself? She shot a sidelong glance at him. 5, I did. Durrett was still lying in the bottom of the chasm, body littering the ground, far from his home. Lyndon cleared his throat. You're incredible. Your master must have been an expert without peer. He was, Yeren said, her voice distant. She stared into the dawn in silence. But Lyndon was in no mood to wait around. He slipped the extra disciple robes out of his pack, holding them out to her. He was glad he'd brought them. There were plenty of other sits nearby, but the blood stains would make them seem holy jeez, okay. But the blood stains would make them somewhat obvious. You should put these on, he said. If the heavens are kind, there won't be any other disciples in the woods, but let's assume there are. Unless they've seen your face before, they won't recognize you in these. I don't have a badge for you, but... He looked around at the bleeding disciples. Only one of them was dead, he realized, though the others weren't far away. The dead boy's remnant peeled itself away from his corpse, like a yellow sketch of a skeleton. It glanced back in Lyndon's direction only once before scampering off into the woods. I'm sure you can find one, he finished. Without a word of protest, Yeren took the clothes and wrapped them around her tattered black robes. His clothes were large enough that she still had room to spare. Once again, his attention was drawn to the thick red coil wrapped around her waist. She didn't untie it, but it still ended up outside the clothes of the Heaven's Glory disciple, as though the belt had melted through her clothes. She slipped an iron striker badge over her neck and gestured to herself. Anything anything missing? Her clothes were too big, she was carrying a sword, and she looked like she'd been living in the woods for 2 weeks. But from a distance, she'd pass. As long as we don't run into Elder Whitehall on the way out, you'll make it. He was more worried about the Elder than anything else, as Whitehall had fled in the opposite direction of the valley. If their luck was bad, they might run into him on the road out. He reached into his big brown pack, checking that he had everything important. His boundary flags, Suriel's warm marble, a few other bits and pieces. He wasn't bringing much, but nothing else would help him on his journey beyond the valley. He was ready. It was time to go. Lyndon's heart actually lifted at the thought. He was absolutely exhausted, every resource in his body and spirit expended. But he made it. He'd won. On the other side of this snow-capped mountain waited a dangerous and infinite world. Yeren took a deep breath and straightened. All right, lead the way. Lyndon had already turned to face the range of mountains past Samara, but he stopped. Turned back. I know it's this way, but beyond that you'll have to lead us out. Out? I've still got a bone to grind with Heaven's Glory School. She gave him a grim smile. They took my master's body, and his sword, and his remnant. If I was soft enough to leave him here... I'm not doing the right accent. Give me one moment, please. I need to cough pretty bad.
Alright, I'm back. Sorry about that. Out? I've still got a bone to grind with Heaven's Glory School. She gave him a grim smile. They took my master's body, and his sword, and his remnant. If I was soft enough to leave him here, I would have walked away. Nope, I'm going British. I don't want to go British. I want to do a different thing. Dang it. They took my master's body, and his sword, and his remnant. If I was soft enough to leave him here, I'd have walked away from this viper's nest weeks ago. No, I've got a few chores left here, and the chief one is you leading me back. It was like a bag had tightened over Lyndon's head. Compared to the freedom he'd just tasted a second before, he felt like choking, like the prison door had been slowly creaking open, only to slam shut. He couldn't accept it. No, no, you swore. He didn't know how punishing the oath would be to him, but for someone of Yaren's power, it would weigh heavily. She might even cripple her future potential by breaking a vow like this. Yaren raised one finger. Welcome back, Santi. I said I'd shepherd you on the path. Wrong accent again. I said I'd shepherd you on the path out, and I will, once we're free and clear. But I'm not popping the lid off this barrel yet. While he searched for words, she patted him on the shoulder. If it eases you any, I'm starting to trust you, she said. A little. I just wanted to advise I'm a go training. Okay, have fun with that, Santi. See ya, have a good time training. I will probably be done streaming before you finish. I've only got a couple pages left. Nervously, Lyndon had thrown together an appropriate story to explain why he was hobbling into the school in the early morning with a battered sister disciple. But no one asked for an explanation. One man cursed at the Unsouled for getting in his way. A few passerby expressed sympathy, and a girl reassured kindly that the sword disciple would see heaven's punishment come soon. I'm not going to be streaming on Friday. I will be streaming on Saturday, though. No one questioned them further than that. These days, coming home wounded was more common than not. When Lyndon reached his room, he knew he couldn't stay long, but he was overwhelmed with the desire to simply collapse on the floor. When Elder Whitehall comes back, this will be the first place he checks, Lyndon said. His jaw had begun to ache again, and every word sent itching needles dancing into his face. We should be gone before that happens, if that's agreeable to you. I have an idea where. He trailed off as Yaren stumbled past him, clumsily tugging off one shoe as she made her way towards his bed. We're not drawing swords in this state, she said. We'll die. Need rest. Halfway through taking off the second shoe, she slumped face first onto the bed. In seconds, she was snoring. At first, Lyndon wondered how she could possibly sleep with the threat of death hanging over them. And she had taken his bed. He slipped off his pack, leaving it next to the door, and reached for her shoe. He had intended to pull it off and put it next to the other, but that was the last thing he remembered. When he came to, Samara's ring was in the sky again, and his neck ached from a night spent in an impossible position. He had collapsed on his side, head jamming up against the side of his bed, Yaren's fingers dangling in his face. For a few seconds, he tried to remember how they had gotten here. He recognized Yaren from Suriel's vision, but the events of the previous day were a blurry haze in his mind.
When the fog cleared and he recalled where he was, fear shot him bolt upright. He had aided an enemy of the Heaven's Glory School. He'd fought an elder, killed an iron disciple. Even the patriarch of the Wei clan would have to pay with his life for such an offense. And here Lyndon was, sleeping in his room as though nothing had happened. He needed to move. He'd staggered to his feet before he stopped again. Move where? He couldn't leave the valley without Yeren, and he couldn't go home. His clan would turn him over to Heaven's Glory for a bent half-silver chip. He calmed himself, gathering his thoughts, taking a long look at his situation. Given that Heaven's Glory would hunt him down as soon as Whitehall returned, then Lyndon had to treat this place like enemy territory. He and Yaren had stayed here too long already. But she had her own conditions. May she rot in the netherworld for them. She wouldn't leave the valley until she got what she wanted, and he couldn't leave without her. He needed her guidance to escape Sacred Valley, and her strength to survive whatever waited outside. Even a Heaven's Glory elder had been crippled with only a few hours outside of the school's territory, so an Unsouled would be lucky to last 10 seconds. He needed her. Excuse me. She lay on his bed, her stolen white robes bulky, and the blood-red rope tied at her waist looking tight and uncomfortable. She was defenseless, scars all over her skin, some of them fresh. Though it burned him, he put away thoughts of abandoning her or tricking her into guiding him out. She cared enough about her master's legacy to stay on the mountain with an entire school hunting her. Nothing he could say would change her mind. He wasn't happy about it, but he could respect resolve like that. Lyndon slid the door open a crack, peeking out. Samara's ring lit empty gardens and iced rainstone buildings. No one watched his door, at least as far as he could tell. Whitehall must not have made it back yet, or else he hadn't spread the word about Lyndon. So Lyndon still had time to use his identity as a Heaven's Glory disciple. At the least, he should be able to find out where the Sword Sage's body was. He reached for his pack. "Where are you going?" Yaren asked. Her voice was vague and bleary, as though she hadn't bothered to wake up before speaking. Lyndon glanced back. She was adjusting her sword belt, moving the hilt around from where it had been poking her in the ribs. "Give me 2 seconds, and I'll find out where they're keeping your master. Until Whitehall comes back, I'm still a disciple." He looked like he'd just returned from a fight on behalf of the school. His white disciple's clothes were stained with blood and dirt. He was scraped and bruised from his head down to the soles of his feet. And his spirit had only just started to recover. The elder should believe any story he spun. If they swallowed that idea that someone at the foundation stage had been allowed to fight the sword disciple. She squinted at him, rubbing the side of her head with one hand. Don't bother yourself. I know where he is." Lyndon froze in the doorway, his frustration returning. "Then why are we here? Let's pick up your master and leave." "Need to harvest his remnant," she said, stretching. "I was aiming to steal the gear from the school, but they kept me too busy. This is 2 steps closer than I ever got before." Lyndon stared at her. Harvest his remnant? Are you a gold? Everyone knew the final step into gold was harvesting a remnant and binding it to your physical body, which made you more than mortal. That is why gold was the pinnacle, a qualitative leap beyond jade. Of course, according to Suriel, gold was just the beginning. "Not yet," Yaren answered him. "Taking in the remnant is the difference between what you all call jade and what you call gold. It's like an heirloom, passed from master to disciple." A brief, stricken look passed across Yaren's face, and Lyndon reminded himself that she had just lost her master. For some, That could be a bond even closer than blood. Lyndon stepped back and let the door close, and she straightened in apparent surprise. Thought you were leaving. If we know where we're going, then there's no need. Now how about a plan? I'm guessing the gear you need is a spirit seal? Yurin's eyes moved between him and the door. Well that that's pleasing. I thought you'd make an excuse to leave, go warn the elders. Lyndon wrestled down his irritation. She had forced him into helping, and now she still doubted him? We're both traitors. They won't treat me any better than you. Crack the door, but don't walk out. Just peek. Just peek. Lyndon had to play more of her games. Oh, if Lyndon had to play more of her games, he might try to strike out on his own after all. Why? She didn't answer, waiting for him to open the door. With a sigh, he did. The night still reigned. No one's there, he said. Thank you for the hydrate, Dag. I appreciate it. Drop a knee, she responded. Feeling like a fool, Lyndon knelt in his own doorway. Dag, you are a monster. What the heck? I'll finish this page and then I'll do or I guess I have the rest of this page and one more until the end of the chapter. I'll do the push ups after I finish the chapter and then I'm ending stream. That's monstrous. Feeling like a fool, Lyndon knelt in his own doorway. I warned you he was the first. I warned you he was the first time he came around. Hi, Tech. Welcome in. Welcome in. How's it going? How are you? You said you wanted to get on your knees. I didn't say I wanted to get on my knees. Lyndon said he got on his knees. What the heck? Hi, Tech. I'm not going to continue what I was going to say to Dag. I'm not going to continue it. Not responding. I'm an innocent, good puppy. I'm innocent and good. Then he saw what had been invisible to him head on, a flat shimmer in the air, floating at eye height. I am stressed, fine otherwise, I think. Hey Dag, so I don't have a clip function set up. Oh, poor Dag. I'm sorry you're stressed though, Tech. What's going on? Or, well, I guess is anything, like, making you stressed? I don't know. A flat shimmer in the air, floating at eye height, like a sword hammered out of pure force. His throat caught. Earlier, if he had taken more than a single step out, it would have sheared through his skull. He managed to fake some level of calm as he answered. Are you a forger, then? Born a ruler, but I did forge that. That was too interesting of a statement in itself. The first elder of the Wei clan was rumored to know both the forger technique and the ruler technique of the White Fox, though of course he was more gifted in one than the other. I'm just of an anxious nature. That's understandable. Well, I really hope that the stress goes away really soon. Make sure to drink plenty of water. When? Lyndon asked, still staring at the blade that almost killed him. I'll lurk so I don't interrupt the reading more. It's okay, there's like a page left. Right before I shut my eyes. We did swear an oath, but we also only met tonight. Didn't trust you then. She'd forged that hours ago, and it had remained steady and solid. Having grown up around his mother, he knew how much skill that took. If she only dabbled in forging, she would never have been able to do it. He couldn't stop imagining an invisible blade passing through his eyes, slicing his brain into two pieces. But he forced himself past it. Does that mean I can trust you not to lay any more lethal traps for me? She considered a moment, then nodded. Not lethal ones. I'm pleased to hear that. He'd take whatever he could get. Now, we need a spirit seal. Yeren loosened her shoulders, swinging her feet around to the other side of the bed. She braced her sword in one hand, and she looked more like a formidable sacred artist, and she looked more like the formidable sacred artist she was. You know where they're kept? The Lesser Treasure Hall. A jade forger lives over that lives over the hall, and there are script-activated security constructs hidden in the floors. Her eyes gleamed, and she leaned in closer. That's more than nothing, but less than something. Now, this treasure hall. They keep more than just seals, true? Suddenly it occurred to Lyndon that something good might actually come of staying in Sacred Valley. You wouldn't believe everything they've got in there. That's pleasing to hear. Now, what did the Wei Clan teach you about stealing from your enemies? I'll bring my pack. And that is the end of chapter 17. Next week, we will start with chapter 18, and we will finish the book. And then sorry about that. Um, I had to. I was getting texts from my mom. Okay. Well, what did they teach you about stealing from your enemies? Never do it while they are looking. Fair enough. I mean, that is perfectly valid. All right. Well, yeah. So that ends it. Real quick, for those of you who are here now, I want to show you a quick something. I did this at the beginning of stream, but I want to do it again because there's people here now. But um I have a little something that my good friend Android finished making. I have these. My good friend Android has finished the sub badges, although um 2/3 of these aren't necessary. I was unaware that the flare for tier 2 and 3 was supposed to come with what's it called? Was just supposed to be the flare itself and not the badge with flare. Um Oh, no. This is just my file explorer. These are sub badges. These are the 6 tiers of sub badges that I have. Oh, like the what are they called?
what are they called? Let me go creator dashboard. The flares a separate image you overlay on the badge. Yeah. So you're supposed to have just the flares, and I didn't know that until after Android made all of the versions. Thank you for the sit-ups, Dag. I will do the push-ups and sit-ups in a second. Okay, fine. If it's not gonna load, then I'm not gonna do it. But yeah, so there are now 6 tiers of badges. We have tier 1. This or not tier 6 tiers. We have 6 levels of badges. We have the first one that you get uh during your first month of being subbed. Then 3 months is silver, 6 months is gold, 9 months is diamond, uh, a year is emerald, and then right now I want to change it once I unlock the 2-year badge, or I might leave these as 1.5, and then have a new level later on for 2 years, because I don't have that unlocked yet, and I don't unlock that until August 11th. I unlock the 2-year sub badge. But yeah. So I now have sub badges. They will be properly set up with Flare soon. But yeah, as of right now, all of the levels are put into Twitch. Okay, I'm gonna quickly do my push-ups and sit-ups, and then I'm going to find someone to raid. And then after I end stream, I am heading straight over to the bookstore to get the second book of Cradle. All right, let me do my push-ups and sit-ups. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Whew. And now sit-ups. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Whew. Did someone make you bark already today? Yes, someone did already make me do that today. How am I getting a second separate ad break? Huh? Oh, welcome in, Mira and Lucy. I'm actually about to end stream. Thank you for the hydrate, Mira, and thank you for the stretch, Lucy. Yep. I always stream on Thursdays at 2 p.m. your time. And then I always end at around 6-ish. Book reading streams. I have to do them early because I have D&D. Well, I got hit with pre-rolls and then a few minutes after an ad break. What? You did? Really? My streams never really start earlier than later than 3 p.m. your time. Oh, my core hurts now. Okay, well, I do gotta find someone to raid into. Let's see who's live. Why is my Twitch tab being so stupid? Well, I don't have D&D for like 2 more hours, but I have stuff that I need to do until then. Yep, couldn't hear your answer to my question because ads, so you're safe this once. Raid Tiffany? I mean, I could. I don't have anyone else to raid. Um, Maybe I won't raid out actually. I kind of just want to end it. I don't want to look for anyone. Okay. Um, Mira and Mira, if you're still here, and Lucy, you're also here. You didn't get to. I didn't get to show you yet, but I do have a funny little thing now. Um, I'll pull it back up. I have these. Let me move back over. I have sub badges. They're so peak. My good friend Android made them for me. You okay there, Lucy? Silly. But yeah, I have 6 levels of sub badges going from 1 month, 3 months, 9 months, no, 6 months, 9 months, a year to a year and a half. I don't have the 2 year one unlocked yet. Thank you for the follow, Revi. Hi, hi. Welcome in, welcome in. How are you doing, Revi? Just woke up. I am okay-ish. Well, I hope you had a really good sleep. I'm doing really good. I'm actually about to end stream. I just finished reading uh the current chapters we were on in the book we're reading. Uh, there's only a very little bit left in it. I think 3 chapters, the epilogue, and bloopers are left in the book. And then either the week after next week or the week after that, we'll start the second book because I'm going to go buy that today. I'm okay. I'm glad I caught you. I didn't know I wasn't following you. Needed to fix that? That's very sweet of you, Revi. I appreciate it. Let me make sure I'm following you in return. I should be. I wasn't. Oh my gosh. Fixed. I fixed it. Now I am. Here, let me do this. Yeah, of course, Revi. I gotta make sure I spell this right. Uh, Everyone go follow my good friend Revi. She's awesome. So cool. But yeah. Okie doke. Well, Y'all so sweet. I'm getting cavities. Well, I'm glad. Um, but yeah, I think that here's where I'm gonna end it for the day. I'm gonna get I'm gonna get headed out. I have a couple things I need to go do before I head over to D&D for the night. So yeah, I appreciate everyone coming in. Uh yeah, I appreciate you all. Y'all are so great. Okie doke. Um Anything else? Am I forgetting anything? Take you with me? I mean, I would if I could. It's a little hard to do that. You kind of, are halfway across the country. Well, all right, everyone. I don't think I'm forgetting anything. I don't think I'm forgetting anything. Am I forgetting anything? Oh, uh, here. It's been a bit since it did it, but you can join the Discord if you'd like. You don't have to if you don't wanna, but there is a Discord. Um, and it has my schedule. I'll be live again on Saturday playing Hogwarts Legacy and Lobotomy Corporation. I will be limiting myself to not 11 hours. I will probably do around 3 hours per game. So a 6 hour stream. So that way I'm not going too long. I went too long last Saturday. And then Sunday, it's not on my schedule. Not 11 hours, so 12 is fine. Yeah, I'll do a 12-hour stream. Thank you, Tech. Okay. So um yeah, and then I'm going to be live again on Sunday just to re-record the first 3 chapters of Unsouled because it's gone. They're dead. All 3 chapters are lost to the aether because I didn't export the VOD in time. So Sunday is going to be like a 2 hour-ish stream of me just um rereading chapters 1 through 3 to make sure that we have all of the chapters together. And then maybe if I can get some editing help from someone, I might want to see about editing all of the oh, I might want to see I'm about getting all of the parts edited together to be one long stream or one long VOD so you don't have to go through each of the different ones and like splicing the portions that I read in other streams because I do know, at least right now, there's only one stream that has a chapter pulled into it. It was the first Hogwarts Legacy video stream that I did where the technical difficulties were happening, so I read a chapter while waiting and it ended up working out almost perfectly. So I might see about getting that chapter spliced out of the Hogwarts Legacy VOD and adding it to um the long VOD. But yeah, that's a plan for later. Thank you so much for everyone who came in. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you on Saturday. Bye bye.